March 15th, 2024. Linda Martinez was preparing dinner in her Phoenix kitchen when her phone rang at 6:47 p.m. She almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, and she had been getting too many spam calls lately. But something made her pick up on the fourth ring, and the voice on the other end would shatter 25 years of carefully constructed lies that had shaped her entire adult life. Mrs. Martinez, my name is Catherine Walsh, and I was a social worker in San Antonio 25 years ago. I handled a very difficult adoption case involving your son, and I've been carrying a secret about what really happened that I can no longer live with. Linda's blood went cold. 25 years earlier, she had given birth to a son who she was told had died during delivery due to complications. She had grieved that baby for over 2 decades, and now a stranger was calling to talk about an adoption involving her supposedly deceased child. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person," Linda replied, her voice trembling. "My son died at birth in 1999. There was no adoption." Catherine Walsh's response would destroy everything Linda thought she knew about her family's history. "Mrs. Martinez, your son didn't die. He was taken from you while you were unconscious after delivery, and he was illegally adopted by a family who paid substantial money to ensure you would never know he had survived. I falsified the death certificate, and I've been living with the guilt of separating you from your child for 25 years. What Linda didn't know was that Catherine Walsh was dying of cancer and had decided to spend her final months exposing an illegal adoption ring that had operated in Texas hospitals during the 1990s, stealing babies from young mothers and selling them to wealthy families who couldn't adopt through legitimate channels. The phone call Linda almost didn't answer was about to reveal that her son Michael was not only alive, but had been searching for his birth mother his entire adult life, living just 200 miles away from the woman who had never stopped grieving his supposed death. Linda Rodriguez had been 17 years old and unmarried when she discovered she was pregnant in 1998. Living in a small Texas town where teenage pregnancy was considered shameful, Linda had faced pressure from her conservative family to hide her condition and deal with the problem quietly. But Linda had refused to consider terminating her pregnancy. Despite the difficult circumstances, she felt a deep connection to her unborn child and was determined to raise him as a single mother, even though it would mean sacrificing her college plans and facing social judgment from her community. "I knew it would be hard," Linda would later recall, "but I loved that baby from the moment I knew he existed. I didn't care what people thought. I was going to be the best mother I could be." Linda's parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, were devout Catholics who were devastated by their daughter's pregnancy, but ultimately supportive of her decision to keep the baby. They helped Linda find a job at a local restaurant and began preparing their home to accommodate a grandchild they were initially ashamed of, but gradually became excited to meet. The pregnancy was difficult from the beginning. Linda suffered from severe morning sickness, high blood pressure, and complications that required regular medical monitoring at San Antonio General Hospital, one of the few facilities in the area that provided prenatal care for uninsured patients. Dr. Patricia Williams, the obstetrician overseeing Linda's care, had seemed compassionate and understanding about Linda's situation as a young single mother. She assured Linda that the hospital had programs to help teenage mothers transition to parenthood, and that financial assistance would be available for both delivery costs and postnatal care. "Dr. Williams made me feel like everything was going to be okay," Linda remembered. "She told me I was brave for choosing to keep my baby, and she promised that the hospital would support me through the whole process." But what Linda didn't realize was that Dr. Williams was part of an illegal operation that identified vulnerable pregnant women, teenagers, immigrants, women without family support, and targeted them for a sophisticated adoption fraud scheme that generated hundreds of thousands of dollars for corrupt medical staff and social workers. Linda went into labor on October 23rd, 1999, 3 weeks before her due date. The delivery was complicated and traumatic, requiring emergency interventions that left Linda unconscious for several hours after her son's birth. When she finally woke up, Dr. Williams delivered the devastating news that would define the next 25 years of Linda's life. "I'm so sorry, Linda," Dr. Williams had said, her voice carefully modulated to convey appropriate sympathy. "There were complications during delivery, and despite our best efforts, your son didn't survive. I know this is devastating news, but sometimes these things happen with high-risk pregnancies. Linda had been too shocked and medicated to ask detailed questions about what had gone wrong or to request to see her baby's body. She trusted Dr. Williams completely and accepted the explanation that her son had died from complications related to his premature birth. The hospital had handled all the arrangements for the baby's burial, telling Linda that it would be too traumatic for her to be involved in planning services for a child she had never had the chance to hold. They assured her that her son had been buried respectfully in a local cemetery, but they never provided specific details about the location or gave Linda any documentation of the burial. Linda spent 25 years grieving a son who was actually alive and growing up just miles away from her. But the conspiracy that stolen her child was far more elaborate than she could have imagined, involving respected medical professionals who had built careers on selling stolen babies to desperate families. The grief that followed her son's supposed death had been overwhelming and life-altering. Linda fell into a deep depression that lasted for months, struggling to understand why she had lost a child she had been so determined to raise and love. Her family and friends encouraged her to move on and put the tragedy behind her, but Linda found it impossible to forget the baby she had carried for 9 months and had been planning her entire future around. She sought counseling, but nothing seemed to ease the pain of losing a child she had never had the chance to know. Linda eventually moved to Phoenix in 2001, hoping that a change of scenery would help her heal from the trauma of her son's death. She went to community college, earned a degree in accounting, and built a quiet life focused on her career and a few close relationships. But she never fully recovered from the loss of her son. Every October 23rd, Linda would visit a local cemetery in Phoenix and place flowers on a memorial stone she had bought to honor the child she had never been able to properly grieve. She would spend hours at that gravestone, talking to a son who existed only in her memory and her imagination. Linda had dated occasionally over the years, but she had never been able to fully commit to serious relationships because a part of her heart remained devoted to the child she had lost. Men who tried to get close to Linda often sensed that she was emotionally unavailable in ways she couldn't explain or overcome. I felt like I was always waiting for something, Linda would later reflect. I couldn't move forward completely because something inside me felt unfinished. I thought it was just grief that wouldn't heal, but now I know it was intuition telling me that my son was still out there. Linda had occasionally wondered about the details of her son's death and burial, but her attempts to get more information from San Antonio General Hospital had been met with bureaucratic obstacles and claims that records from that period were not easily accessible. When she had pressed for specific information about where her son was buried, hospital administrators had told her that privacy regulations prevented them from sharing detailed information about deceased patients, even with family members. Linda had accepted these explanations because she had no reason to suspect that the medical professionals she had trusted were lying to her. What Linda didn't know was that Catherine Walsh, the social worker who had facilitated the illegal adoption of her son, had been watching Linda's life from a distance for 25 years, feeling increasingly guilty about her role in separating mother and child. Catherine Walsh had been dying of cancer for 6 months when she decided to expose the adoption fraud that had made her wealthy but cost her soul. But telling Linda the truth would only be the beginning of revealing how many families had been destroyed by the conspiracy she had helped operate. Catherine Walsh had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in September 2023, and her doctors had given her less than a year to live. Facing her own mortality had forced Catherine to confront the moral weight of decisions she had made decades earlier, when she was a young social worker more interested in money than ethics. The illegal adoption operation had been sophisticated and lucrative. Dr. Patricia Williams would identify pregnant women who were young, isolated, or financially vulnerable, women who would be less likely to ask difficult questions or hire lawyers to investigate suspicious circumstances surrounding their babies' births. When these women went into labor, Dr. Williams would use medical interventions to ensure they were unconscious during or immediately after delivery. While the mothers were sedated, healthy babies would be removed from the hospital and delivered to prearranged adoptive families who had paid between $50,000 and $100,000 for private, confidential adoptions. Catherine's role was to falsify official documents, creating fake death certificates for babies who were actually alive, forging adoption records that concealed the identities of birth mothers, ensuring that no legal trail existed that could connect stolen children to their biological families. Over a 5-year period from 1996 to 2001, Catherine estimated that the operation had illegally placed more than 40 babies with adoptive families, generating over $2 million in illegal profits that were split between Dr. Williams, several hospital administrators, and Catherine herself. I told myself I was helping babies get good homes with families who could provide better lives than their birth mothers, Catherine would later admit. But I knew what we were doing was wrong. We were stealing children and destroying families for money. The operation had ended in 2001, when new hospital administrators implemented stricter oversight procedures that made it more difficult to falsify records and remove babies without proper documentation. Dr. Williams had retired. Catherine had transferred to a different hospital system, and the conspiracy had dissolved without ever being exposed or investigated. For over 20 years, Catherine had lived with the knowledge that dozens of families had been torn apart by the crimes she had facilitated. She had used her share of the illegal profits to buy a house, pursue graduate education, and build a respectable career as a licensed clinical social worker. But as Catherine's cancer progressed and she faced the reality of her approaching death, she could no longer live with the guilt of knowing that birth mothers were still grieving children who were actually alive, and that adopted children were growing up without access to their true family histories and medical information. I realized I could die with my secrets, or I could spend whatever time I have left trying to reunite the families I helped destroy, Catherine explained in a journal she kept during her final months. I chose to try to make amends, even if it meant destroying my own reputation and potentially facing legal consequences. Catherine had spent months researching the current locations of birth mothers who had been victims of the adoption fraud, and Linda Martinez had been the first person on her list to contact. Linda's phone call with Catherine Walsh would last for 3 hours and reveal not just that her son was alive, but that he had been desperately searching for her since he turned 18. The reunion they were both hoping for would depend on whether Linda could forgive the people who had stolen 25 years from both of them. During their initial phone conversation, Catherine Walsh provided Linda with details about the adoption fraud that were both heartbreaking and infuriating. Linda learned that her son had been given the name Michael Thompson and had been raised by a wealthy Dallas family who had been told that his birth mother had voluntarily relinquished her parental rights. "Your son grew up in a loving home," Catherine assured Linda, "but he never felt like he truly belonged with his adoptive family. He started searching for you when he turned 18, and he's been looking for Linda Rodriguez for the past 6 years." Michael Thompson, now 24 years old, had been trying to locate his birth mother through genealogy websites, private investigators, and adoption search organizations. But his search had been complicated by the false documents Catherine had created, which made it nearly impossible to trace his biological origins through official records. Catherine provided Linda with Michael's current contact information, along with photographs showing a young man who unmistakably resembled Linda's father and brothers. The family resemblance was so strong that Linda began crying the moment she saw Michael's picture. "He has your eyes and your father's smile," Catherine told Linda. And according to the private investigator he hired last year, he's been working as an elementary school teacher in Austin, while continuing to search for the mother he's never stopped hoping to find. Linda learned that Michael had grown up knowing he was adopted, but his adoptive parents had told him that his birth mother had been a drug addict who had voluntarily given him up because she couldn't care for him. This lie had caused Michael years of emotional pain and self-doubt about why his birth mother hadn't wanted him. "He's been carrying guilt about being unwanted his entire life," Catherine explained. "He needs to know that you never chose to give him up, that you love him and wanted to raise him yourself." But Catherine's revelations went beyond just Linda's situation. She told Linda that the adoption fraud had affected dozens of other families, and that she was planning to contact other birth mothers who had been told their babies had died when they had actually been stolen for illegal adoptions. "Linda, you're not the only mother who has been grieving a child who is actually alive," Catherine said. "I'm going to spend whatever time I have left reuniting as many families as possible. But I need to warn you that exposing this conspiracy is going to be painful for everyone involved, including the adoptive families who had no idea they were participating in illegal adoptions." Catherine provided Linda with documentation proving that her son had been illegally adopted, copies of the falsified death certificate, records showing payments from Michael's adoptive family, and communications between Dr. Williams and adoption brokers who had facilitated the illegal transactions. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Linda's son had been stolen from her while she was unconscious, and she had spent 25 years mourning a child who was alive, well, and searching for her. Linda's decision to contact Michael would require enormous courage from both mother and son. 25 years of separation couldn't be erased with a single phone call, but their reunion would prove that some bonds are strong enough to survive even the most devastating betrayals. Linda spent 3 sleepless nights after her conversation with Catherine Walsh, staring at photographs of the son she had thought was dead and trying to process the reality that she could potentially have a relationship with a child she had grieved for 25 years. The decision to contact Michael was terrifying for Linda. What if he resented her for giving him up? What if he was happy with his adoptive family and didn't want a relationship with his birth mother? What if 25 years of separation had created too much distance for them to build a meaningful connection? But Linda's desire to know her son was stronger than her fear of rejection. On March 18, 2024, she gathered the courage to call Michael Thompson and introduce herself as a mother he had been searching for his entire adult life. Michael, my name is Linda Martinez, and I believe I'm your birth mother, Linda said when Michael answered his phone. I need you to know that I never gave you up for adoption. I was told you died at birth, and I've been grieving you for 25 years. Michael's reaction was immediate and emotional. He had dreamed of this phone call since he was 18 years old, but he had never imagined that his birth mother had been told he was dead. I've been looking for you my entire adult life, Michael said through tears. I hired private investigators. I did DNA tests. I searched every database I could find. I never stopped believing I would find you someday. Their first conversation lasted 6 hours, as mother and son shared 25 years of experiences, dreams, and questions that had shaped their separate lives. Linda told Michael about her pregnancy, the traumatic delivery, and the devastating news that he had supposedly died. Michael shared his experiences growing up adopted, his feelings of not quite belonging with his adoptive family, and his persistent sense that his birth mother had loved him despite what he had been told. I always felt like something was missing, Michael told Linda. My adoptive parents are good people, but I never felt like I was really their son. I always wondered if my birth mother ever thought about me or regretted giving me up. Linda's response was immediate and heartfelt. Michael, I thought about you every single day for 25 years. I visited a memorial stone I bought for you every year on your birthday. I never stopped loving you or wishing I could have raised you myself. The emotional reunion between Linda and Michael was complicated by the realization that Michael's adoptive parents, Richard and Susan Thompson, had been innocent victims of the adoption fraud. They had paid substantial money for what they believed was a legal private adoption, and they had raised Michael with love and devotion for 24 years. Michael faced a difficult challenge of maintaining his relationship with the adoptive parents, who had raised him while building a new relationship with a birth mother he had never stopped searching for. The reunion between Linda and Michael would be just the beginning of their journey together. Catherine Walsh's dying confession would expose a conspiracy that had affected dozens of families, leading to criminal investigations and a reckoning that was 25 years overdue. Linda and Michael met in person for the first time on March 25, 2024, exactly 1 week after their first phone conversation. The reunion took place at a coffee shop in Austin, halfway between Linda's home in Phoenix and Michael's apartment in Austin. The moment Linda saw Michael walking toward her, she knew beyond any doubt that he was her son. Despite 25 years of separation, the family resemblance was unmistakable, and the connection between mother and son was immediate and profound. You look exactly like my father did when he was your age, Linda told Michael as they embraced the first time. I would have recognized you anywhere. Michael was equally moved by meeting the mother he had imagined for most of his life. You're exactly how I pictured you, he said. I used to dream about what you looked like and what you were like as a person. Meeting you feels like coming home. Their reunion was emotional and healing for both mother and son, but it was also the beginning of a complex process of building a relationship that had been stolen from them during Michael's infancy. They had to navigate the challenges of getting to know each other as adults while processing the trauma of their forced separation and the deception that had kept them apart. Michael introduced Linda to his adoptive parents, Richard and Susan Thompson, who were devastated to learn that the adoption they had believed was legal had actually been part of a criminal conspiracy. The Thompsons had loved Michael deeply and had always been open about his adoption, but they had never suspected that they had unknowingly participated in child trafficking. "We thought we were giving a loving home to a child whose birth mother couldn't care for him," Susan Thompson said during an emotional meeting with Linda. "If we had known what really happened, we would never have participated in separating a mother from her child." The Thompsons' response to learning the truth was gracious and supportive. They welcomed Linda into Michael's extended family and encouraged a relationship between mother and son, even though it was painful for them to realize that their family had been built on a lie. Meanwhile, Catherine Walsh continued her mission to expose the adoption fraud and reunite other separated families. Her revelations had attracted the attention of law enforcement agencies, and criminal investigations were launched into conspiracy that had operated at San Antonio General Hospital during the late 1990s. Dr. Patricia Williams, now in her 70s, was arrested and charged with fraud, conspiracy, and child trafficking. Several other hospital employees who had participated in the illegal adoption ring were also charged, though some had died or could not be located after more than 20 years. The reunion between Linda Martinez and Michael Thompson marked the beginning of a healing journey that would transform both of their lives and inspire other families affected by adoption fraud to seek their own reunions. Linda and Michael spent the following months getting to know each other and building the relationship they had been denied for 25 years. They discovered shared interests, similar personalities, and family traits that confirmed their biological connection, while also celebrating the unique individuals they had become during their years apart. Michael learned about his extended biological family, including grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins who had grieved his supposed death and were overjoyed to discover that he was alive. Linda's parents, now in their 70s, were able to meet the grandson they had mourned for over 2 decades. "Meeting my biological grandparents was incredible," Michael said. "They had stories about my mother's childhood that helped me understand where I came from, and they welcomed me into the family like I had never been gone." Linda found that having Michael back in her life helped heal emotional wounds she hadn't fully understood. The depression and sense of incompleteness that had affected her for 25 years began to lift as she built a relationship with a son she had never stopped loving. "I didn't realize how much of my life had been shaped by grief until Michael came back," Linda reflected. "Having him in my life again made me feel whole for the first time since 1999. Michael's adoptive parents, the Thompsons, handled the complex family dynamics with grace and wisdom. They continued to be Michael's parents while supporting his relationship with Linda and his biological extended family. Their response became a model for how adoptive families can navigate the challenges of reunification when adoptions have been based on deception. Catherine Walsh lived long enough to see Linda and Michael reunited and to facilitate reunions between several other birth mothers and their stolen children. Her dying confession led to the exposure of an adoption fraud conspiracy that had affected more than 40 families and resulted in criminal prosecutions that brought some measure of justice to the victims. Catherine died in December 2024, 8 months after her first phone call to Linda. Her final act was creating a foundation to help families affected by adoption fraud locate each other and rebuild relationships that had been destroyed by criminal conspiracies. Linda and Michael now work together to advocate for adoption reform and to help other families who may have been victims of similar fraud schemes. They speak publicly about their experience and encourage other birth mothers who were told their children died to investigate the circumstances of those supposed deaths. If something doesn't feel right about your child's death, trust your instincts and ask questions, Linda advises other mothers. "I wish I had pushed harder for answers 25 years ago, but it's never too late to search for the truth." Michael has become a passionate advocate for adoptee rights and transparent adoption practices. His experience of growing up believing his birth mother hadn't wanted him has made him determined to ensure that other adopted children have access to truthful information about their origins. The story of Linda and Michael's reunion has inspired legislative efforts to improve oversight of private adoptions and to create better systems for verifying that birth parents have genuinely consented to relinquishing their parental rights. Their phone call reunion, which began with Catherine Walsh's confession, became a catalyst for exposing adoption fraud and helping dozens of other families find each other after years or decades of separation. Linda and Michael's relationship continues to grow stronger as they build new memories together while honoring the 25 years they lost. Their story proves that love between parents and children can survive the most devastating betrayals, and that it's never too late for families to find their way back to each other. If you've been moved by Linda and Michael's incredible journey, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others who might need to hear this story of hope and reunion. And if you want to see more amazing stories of families overcoming impossible odds, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss these life-changing tales. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need them most. Drop a comment below if you have your own family reunion story, or if you think there are others out there who might have been victims of similar adoption fraud. Sometimes sharing these stories is the first step in helping other families find their way back to each other.